Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tackling something that forms the invisible backbone of trust in our modern world. I mean, think about it. Whether you're drinking a glass of tap water, driving your car down the highway, or taking daily medication, you are relying heavily on laboratory data to be absolutely accurate. But how in the world do we actually guarantee that reliability? Well, the answer lies in a specific international standard known as ISO/IEC 17025. So in this explainer, we're going to demystify this critical blueprint for laboratory competence and break down exactly how it builds unwavering trust in test results globally. So I want you to think about this question for a second. How do we know a lab is actually competent? If a testing facility hands you a piece of paper that says a jet engine part is perfectly safe or a medical device is calibrated correctly, you literally don't just want to take their word for it, right? We rely on accurate testing every single day in manufacturing, healthcare, environmental protection, you name it. And competence? Well, it's not just about having fancy state-of-the-art equipment. It's a verifiable, incredibly rigorous system of quality. Okay, let's dive into this by defining exactly what a laboratory actually is. Straight from Clause 3.6 of the standard, a laboratory is defined as a body that performs testing, calibration, or sampling associated with subsequent testing or calibration. So we're not just talking about scientists in white coats mixing chemicals in beakers. We're talking about calibration facilities, adjusting ultra-sensitive measurement tools, and field teams taking environmental samples that'll be tested later. Basically, if an organization does any of those three things, this standard absolutely applies to them. And here is the authoritative ISO/IEC 17025 document from 2017. It's a remarkably dense, roughly 30-page international rulebook that essentially guarantees the reliability of data all around the globe. It was developed jointly by the International Organization for Standardization and the International Electrotechnical Commission. And our goal today? We're going to translate this dense, highly technical document into a clear, completely understandable roadmap. To do that, we've structured this explainer around 5 key chapters, essentially the pillars of laboratory competence. Number 1, we'll look at the foundation, impartiality and confidentiality. 2, essential resource requirements. 3, we'll map out the laboratory process journey. 4, we'll unpack metrological traceability. And finally, number 5, we'll cover the management system options. Let's get started. Section 1, Foundation, Impartiality, and Confidentiality. Before a single test tube is filled, or a machine is ever turned on or calibrated, absolute ethical trust has got to be established. Honestly, without impartiality and confidentiality, the scientific validity of a lab's work literally means nothing. The standard is incredibly strict about this. Clause 4.13 states explicitly that a lab shall not allow commercial, financial, or other pressures to compromise impartiality. Just imagine a lab testing a product made by its own parent company. If there's pressure to pass a faulty product just to save a few bucks, the data is completely compromised. So the lab has to actively identify risks to its impartiality on an ongoing basis and prove exactly how it eliminates or minimizes those risks. Data must never, ever be skewed by outside pressures. And right alongside impartiality is the absolute mandate for strict confidentiality. Clause 4.2 dictates that labs have to legally bind themselves and all their personnel to protect proprietary customer data. Say a customer develops a groundbreaking new material, the lab analyzing it absolutely cannot leak that recipe. And even if information comes from outside sources, like a regulatory body, the lab is bound to keep that source confidential unless they've agreed otherwise. Section 2, Essential Laboratory Resource Requirements. With our ethical foundation set, we move to the physical and human assets covered in Clause 6, and this brilliantly illustrates just how comprehensive the standard is when it comes to physical assets. When we say equipment, we're definitely not just talking about microscopes and scales here. ISO/ISE 17025 defines equipment to include measuring instruments, the software running those instruments, measurement standards, reference materials, right down to the reagents and consumables used in the actual tests. Every single piece of this equipment has to be verified before use, routinely calibrated, and meticulously maintained to prevent any sort of contamination or deterioration. But here's the thing. World-class equipment is pretty much useless without competent human beings operating it, right? Clause 6.2 dictates that human resources are just as vital. A lab can't just hire someone off the street and let them run complex tests. The standard requires documented proof of competence for every single function. That means documented education, training, and technical knowledge. Plus, personnel have to be specifically authorized for key tasks, like validating methods, analyzing results, and actually signing off on the final reports.
Section 3. The laboratory process journey.
So now we're moving from the structural pillars of ethics and resources into the literal life cycle of a test sample. Now, what's really interesting about this master map, directly from Annex B of the standard, is how it perfectly visualizes the entirety of Clause 7. It's a flowchart showing exactly how everything connects. Over on the left, a request comes in from a customer. It moves through sampling and preparation right into the core execution of testing or calibration, and finally out to the right as a finished, officially authorized report. And sitting right in the center, you have the management of technical records and data, literally holding the whole operation together.
We can actually walk through that journey as a sort of 4-step mini-narrative. Step 1, the review of requests. A lab doesn't just blindly accept work. They have to review the contract to make sure they actually have the capability and the exact right method to do what the customer is asking for. Step 2 is sampling and handling. The item has to be uniquely identified so it's never confused with anything else, and it has to be stored under strictly controlled environmental conditions. Step 3 is the actual execution, using validated methods and carefully evaluating measurement uncertainty. And finally, Step 4, reporting of results. This has to be a clear, objective, and authorized document that gives the customer everything they need to interpret the findings.
But what happens when things go wrong? Maybe a sample arrives totally damaged, or the lab's environmental monitoring shows the room got way too hot during a sensitive test. Well, Clause 7.10 handles this. It's called non-conforming work. When an issue like this pops up, the lab doesn't just guess what to do, and they certainly don't sweep it under the rug. They have to immediately pause operations, carefully evaluate the risk and significance of the problem, notify the customer if they need to, and implement corrective actions so it literally never happens again. It's an incredibly robust built-in safety net. Section 4. Metrological Traceability Explained. We're now transitioning into one of the absolute most critical, yet often misunderstood, parts of the whole standard. Metrological traceability. Trace this unbroken chain with me for a second. How do you actually know that a kilogram measured in Tokyo is the exact same as a kilogram measured in Toronto? Well, it starts all the way at the top with the International System of Units, or the SI units. National Metrology Institutes hold the national standards that realize these SI units. Then, those institutes calibrate the equipment of accredited calibration labs. And then, those accredited labs calibrate the equipment used in your local testing lab. This unbroken, documented chain of calibrations, with each link contributing its own evaluated measurement uncertainty, guarantees that the final, valid measurement result on your lab report is directly anchored to a globally agreed-upon truth. Pretty amazing, right?
Section 5. Management systems, 2 options.
Now, all these technical processes and strict calibrations are brilliant, but they absolutely need protective management oversight to ensure continuous quality and improvement over time. The standard offers 2 structural options to achieve this. Option A is for a lab to implement the core 1705 management requirements directly. We're talking about things like controlling documents, running internal audits, corrective actions, and management reviews. Let's move to Option B and see how this builds into Option B. Option B is a brilliant alternative for a laboratory that's already part of a larger organization operating an ISO 9001 quality management system. Option B essentially allows them to fulfill the intent of the standard's management requirements using their existing ISO 9001 system. It reduces redundant paperwork while still maintaining total technical competence.
So the crucial takeaway here is that behind every single valid laboratory result is an intense, heavily documented infrastructure of competence, impartiality, and traceability. It's this invisible chain connecting a local test tube to the international system of units that literally keeps our world safe, standardized, and functioning smoothly. So next time you read a lab report, whether it's for a routine medical test, soil analysis, or product safety, ask yourself, is the chain unbroken? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on ISO IEC 17025. Keep questioning and keep learning.